Special meeting of the San Ramon Planning Commission. We'll call to order at 6:05. And we have a roll call, but before we do, I'd like to recognize that we do have a new commissioner with us tonight. Commissioner Marks resigned as of the end of March, and we now have a new commissioner, Asher Ahmed. Welcome to the commission, and thank you for applying and being part of our group here. So with that, if we could have roll call.
Commissioner Ahmed. Commissioner Kuznick.
Here.
Commissioner Wallace.
I'm here.
Vice Chair Edwards.
Present.
And Chair Alpert.
Here. So tonight is actually a study session on the Chevron Park, and I believe we have a staff report from Planning Manager Lauren Barr.
Well, not too much of a report, just a brief recap. So over this past couple of months, we've had a couple of workshops on the Chevron Park concepts, including 2 with the Planning Commission and then a EDAC and Housing Advisory Committee joint session. And so Sunset Development has been working to refine their vision based on the comments received through those workshops. And they're back before us tonight to provide their latest version of the plan, and then also to talk a little bit about the vision of the Bishop Ranch core in terms of housing and activities there. So with that, I'll turn it over to Alexander to go through their slides.
Sorry. And the second is some modifications we made to the land use diagram and to discuss any further comments on the land use diagram for the Chevron Park project. We have named the project the Orchards, and we'll try to refer to it going forward. We will recognize our significant partner and customer Chevron at the project in some way, but we didn't want to confuse their new corporate headquarters at our Lakeside project with the Chevron Park project. So in order to simplify that, we gave it the name the Orchards. Hopefully that's acceptable to you all. I wanted to speak first about the matter of residential density. In our first meeting, I spoke about San Ramon's identity, and from a planning perspective noted that our city is largely characterized by high density development in the core, much of which is our buildings, and low density housing development in the neighborhoods. A quarter-acre lot is an attribute Americans have come to associate with a quality home. Obviously, a quarter-acre lot results in a density of 4 units per acre, and in San Ramon, we have a lot of that. For decades, home builders have had great success delivering this type of product in San Ramon, and more so than Bishop Ranch, these developments have provided space for the citizens that have made our community the wonderful place that it is today. I have a deep appreciation for our relationship with you all, the city, and our community. We are long-term investors, and because of that, you know us, you see us here often as we work together to perfect plans for the future, and you interface with our projects because they're public-facing. While our work operates on a long-term investment time frame, the home builders work on a project-by-project basis. Their model is to build a great community and to sell it to the new owners. That said, their legacy stands side by side with us in these communities that they have delivered. I'm talking about this because they have a very significant and important role in Bishop Ranch, and we don't want to overlook that. Home builders can create a lot of different types of product at different densities, but generalizing, you'll rarely see them delivering more than a 3-story product. At the max density, this would be a 3-story row townhome or a stacked townhome, which would come out in the 20 unit per acre range. In this graphic on the left-hand side, you see the type of quarter-acre homes, which I discussed. As you move to the right-hand side, you get to 3-story products, and then the color changes to white, and that is a different type of building. When you break 3 stories, you go to elevators, common corridors, structured parking. It's a different building. It takes longer to build, It's more expensive. You can't occupy it until everybody's in or till it's done. While the buildings just to the left sort of look like they're not townhomes, that's roughly the height and scale of a townhome. Building at the upper range of the 3-story for sale product is extremely important to our future in Bishop Branch. First, from a planning perspective, for sale homes where the owner has their own garage, front door, and stoop are a totally different experience than the next step up where you have elevators, common parking, and corridors. The density, assuming 20 units per acre, is 5 times greater than the quarter-acre lot, and is the highest you can achieve while still preserving that experience of having your own stoop and front door that so many of our families love. There has been a lot of talk about Summerhill's City Village project, which is being delivered at a density of 18 units per acre and is shown here. This is the highest for sale product density they have ever done with their vast experience across all markets in the Bay Area. Our feeling is that it is a quite dense project. We might not want to see so many detached homes, but I would say that these detached homes are practically attached with how close they are to one another, and it's really a method of product differentiation for Summerhill. These products are delivered entirely from wood framing, and consequently can be delivered far quicker than a multifamily building where concrete garages need to be built before the wood framing goes up. They are also delivered unit by unit, whereas a multifamily building can only gain occupancy after 100% completion. A lot of these terms are industry jargon that could really mean many different things to different people. What I mean when I say multifamily is the larger 5 to 7 story buildings that are served by elevators. These buildings would be predominantly rental in Bishop Branch, but some could be condos. High density home builder product where there's a front door for each unit is around 20 units per acre at the max. Multifamily product, like what Related is building, ranges from 70 to 100 units per acre. And here you see the renderings of Related in Belmont, which you're familiar with, both of which are the higher density multifamily type buildings. So what is in between? These would be higher density 3 or 4 story buildings with corridors and elevators. Oftentimes they have surface parking and would be called garden apartments. Here are some of these around San Ramon. We do not feel that these tweener projects serve us well in Bishop Branch. We feel that if people want to have a high density experience, it should be in well-located projects at the Orchards or City Walk. They should live with a common garage, a great common garage, a lobby, and amenities, and gain the trade-off of being closer to retail. This is the 80 to 100 DU per acre product. So a couple of different products I'll just go through quickly. This is the view of Camino Ramon looking south at City Center. On your left, you have the hotel. You have a multifamily building behind it on Bollinger, and you can see BR1 in the background. And on the right looks like a 2-story townhome, but it's actually a piece of the larger multifamily building. This slide shows the 20 sites where we're proposing the higher density multifamily product. And as we've discussed in the past, the green dots are the ones underway. The blue dots are the proposed ones. The yellow dot is City Village by Summerhill. As we've discussed in the past, it's going to take us a very long time to get through all of these buildings. We're going to be in I think we said 20 years with City Walk. We're adding a couple of orchards. It's going to be a long time before 2040s before we get to the tail end of this. And that's because it's the same thing. Not that if you have a studio, 1, 2-bedroom, 3-bedroom unit, but people that live in apartments are a limited amount of a limited market. You can't deliver more than 1 a year. Us developers are somewhat over optimistic. So I would say if we delivered 1 a year, starting in a few years after Related is done, that would put us in the 2040s. Sometimes we're not always right about the economy letting us build 1 a year, but we would never build 2 a year. So on this slide, you can see the layering of density. In the core, you have the 2600 project, City Center, the garage we built, BR3, some of the City Walk apartments on 2600, And as you move north, this oblique view gives you a view of how the layering would work as you get into City Village and why that is sort of appropriate. So what we're advocating tonight is to view Bishop Ranch as one development when it comes to density. There's been no commentary about the lower densities in the context of the orchards, because those units happen to be next to multifamily buildings that bring the average density up to 55 DUs per acre on that site. When we work on the smaller sites that are further north in Bishop Ranch, where lower density development makes sense, we feel they should be viewed in the context of the adjacent City Walk project, where densities are above 80 DUs per acre. At the end of the day, we feel that a site-wide density of around 50 units per acre would be ideal. Today, there are about 6,500 units in San Ramon that are within buildings of 5 units or more. The current slate of multifamily we have on City Walk and Orchards would double that with another 6,500 units, just to give you an idea of the scale. 75% of the housing stock in San Ramon today is single-family homes. 65% are detached, 10% are attached. 85% of what we have on the books, including City Walk, City Village, and Orchards, is multifamily product. So 85% of what we proposed is the super dense stuff. 15% is the lower density, albeit a lot higher density than the 75% of San Ramon, because it's 20 units an acre, not 4 to 6, versus 75-25 in the other direction more broadly. With regard to unit sizes, we've assembled this slide to show that while there are a variety of sizes offered at Related and Summerhill, on the average, the size is a good range for what we know the market desires. And I think the commission's comfortable with that average size. Capping the unit size would eliminate the few 3 or 4 bedroom units that we have and limit the variety of people that could occupy a unit without considering that the average is within the range that you want. Obviously, this average is brought down by units that are much smaller than the ranges that were discussed when we were talking about the cap. Again, we asked you to view these on average, sort of like the densities, since we see the variety it will create and how important that is to the population that's going to live here. You're familiar with this slide. Let me just put it in here again in case there's any discussion about it. And now on to Chevron Park. I promised we'd change the name, but apparently I didn't change it on the slide. Yeah, it's my fault. So the longstanding principles we've talked about from the start: higher density development along Bollinger Canyon Road, concentrated retail and commercial vertical mixed use along Bollinger, complementary to city center, a variety of housing typologies, and 10-year scaling down to complement Inverness Park in the south. And this diagram is largely what you've seen in the past. The changes we've made were to orient the park east-west, as we talked about last time. But more importantly, we flipped it with the purple building and moved it closer to the retail and added the retail you see ringing it. We think that scale of retail with the park would be leasable and would work. And we think bringing the park closer to the retail center would activate it and make that a nice city amenity, citywide amenity. We modified the buildings along 680 somewhat, and we added pocket parks around the Heritage Oaks, which we talked about, but weren't in the plan before. And we added some extra circulation in the project and corrected the name of Sunset Drive, which was pointed out to us last time. So, so that's that. We can come back to it if you'd like at some point. And then just a couple of design slides. Here you see some of the retail ideas for street retail. Again, more neighborhood serving, lower cost to construct, more regular use type things for the community, as opposed to city center. Here's some multifamily buildings. They have retail on the basis, so these aren't really street retail, but you can see how that goes together. Here are some higher density home builder type product. These are some images of old style architecture that we don't want to copy, but we'd want to find a new take on it to create townhomes that are a little more attractive and timeless. So tonight we are asking you to consider, in addition to the discussion we'll have, maintaining that 20 unit per acre floor across the DMU, south and north, assuming an average density across Bishop Branch of about 50 units an acre. Bumping this to 25 or 30 even would take us into a different building type for those some of those sites in the northern part of Bishop Branch, and it would definitely extend our development timeframe significantly. On a related note, we wanted to discuss the prior consideration of units being shifted into Bishop Branch in order to preserve the retail centers. With housing delivered more quickly, we're excited to see what improvements new homeowners could bring to these retail centers, which are desperately needed, as you guys have spoken about at length. We ask there not be a cap on unit sizing, and if a regulation is required, it be a reasonable average rather than a cap. And lastly, we'd love any feedback on the orchards plan revisions. Thank you again, and happy to have any discussions or questions.
Commissioners, do we have any questions at this point? Mr. Wallace.
Yeah, you ran through the last part a little bit quickly. So you mentioned DMU North. I assume you meant DMU North as part, that's in Bishop Branch.
Right.
Okay, so that last part of your conversation wasn't just about the orchards. It was about the other part of Bishop Branch. And as I understood what you were saying is that you did not feel that it would be, I'm trying to think of the right word, not necessarily appropriate, but beneficial to bump the bottom level of density above 20 units per acre.
That's correct.
And the reason for that is, in simple English,
That you enter a different building type.
okay, that was the part to the beginning of your story, which is you can go up to 20 units per acre, 20 units per acre if you have 3-story buildings, i.e. city village.
Right.
But if you're going to get denser than that, then you're going to go up basically 4 and above. The building changes from the stucco and wood frame that you get, say, at City Village, to steel and concrete like you have at the related apartments or planned for the related apartments.
Yes, I'm learning about this myself.
Okay.
And so it's not entirely true. You could enter a 3-story building that has an elevator and common corridors. What I know you lose is the front door, the stoop, and the garage that's right there at your unit. And I think that those are important characteristics for people that are going to live in this higher density downtown environment. Once you break through 20, you start to get into an elevator and it could be a breezeway, just a different kind of living than people that would want to live in that traditional for sale home would want.
Right. No, I think I understood that part, is that, you know, the product that you have, I should say you, not you necessarily, but you're stuck with it because it's in Bishop Branch. City Village has the 3 stories.
Yeah.
Some are townhomes, some are detached. And as you know, there's a big hole in our inclusionary housing ordinance for detached homes.
Yeah.
At the moment. So that's been one problem we've been trying to deal with. I had a question though about, if you don't mind asking, about the diagram for the orchards that borders Inverness Park. The area that's closest to Inverness Park that's shown on your drawing, is that sort of a buffer? Is that the buffer zone?
Yes.
Okay. And if you could give us an estimate, because someone's going to ask, what is the average buffer zone as it borders Inverness Park?
I'm going to make sure I'm accurate. It's average 75, minimum 60.
Okay, and so I know that, as you know, there had been discussion at a couple of our workshops that the buildings that were closest to Inverness Park, there was some discussion of 1-story or 2 stories that would sort of match the single family homes in Inverness Park. But as I understand it, it's hard to read. You're talking about 2 to 3-story homes past the buffer zone that's north of the buffer zone.
Yes.
Okay, and the 2-story, I mean, do you have a product type in mind for the 2-story homes?
It's just a smaller 3-story home.
Just
So-
a smaller 3-story, okay.
And so the thing about the 1-story home is it creates a seismic shift again in the building type. Because basically in a 2-story home, You have a garage with a small powder room and a little unit down there. And then everything's on the second, the kitchen's on the second floor, all that's on the second floor, that bedrooms. So if you get into a 3 or 4 bedroom, that's a 3-story home, and there's bedrooms upstairs, maybe 2 on the second level, 1 on the ground level. And so if you make it 1 story, the living space will become side by side with the garage, and it cuts your unit count by half.
Right. No, I understand that.
Yeah.
So in terms of the product mix you're looking at, do you at least have under consideration a product type that has stacked flats?
Oh, yes, there's a lot of that.
Okay.
Because the unit count we showed is 600 in the yellow category-ish. And so the majority of it is going to be the higher density stack flat townhome, row town, that kind of thing.
Okay, just so we're clear, because some people may not be familiar with the nomenclature, and hopefully I'm not misusing it. But a stacked flat is a unit that is on 1 story, but is in a multi-story building.
Yes.
Okay, just want to make sure we're on the same page. Given the current configuration of what you have on the screen right now, do you have an estimate as to how many dwelling units you're programming for the orchards?
I believe it's 2,600.
It's still 2,600. Okay, that's what I thought. 2,500, 2,600. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now, the Central Park area, if I understand what you were saying, is you're currently considering bordering part of the park, at least with some type of retail.
That's the red hash marks.
Yeah, that's okay. That's what I understood to be. Okay. Which of course we had talked about at virtually every meeting. Okay. All right. Well, that's all the questions I had right now.
Okay.
Quick question on that topic then. Do you have kind of a figure on the square feet of retail in this configuration?
125,000.
Okay.
125,000.
Okay, thank you. And is that more than we saw last time? It looks like it.
It's about the same.
Okay,
This stuff around the park is not that big, so you don't want to have a huge presence, because when it's consolidated, you need a big parking structure and all this stuff. So that's sort of what makes sense there.
Any other questions, Commissioner Kuznec?
No, that's
Okay. Commissioner Edwards, do you have any questions at this time? Okay. Do you have any questions at this time? Okay. Why don't we go ahead and open public comment? And do we have any speaker cards at this time?
I wants a country.
Okay.
Hi, planning commissioners and developer. I just want to bring up a point that was already addressed by one of the EDAC members at the last joint meeting of EDAC and Housing Advisory. And I'm also repeatedly seeing that that member's comment was not really taken seriously. So I would like to formally present it again for your consideration and also for the developer's consideration. Since we already have a San Ramon Central Park right over here on Bollinger Canyon Road, it is very confusing to hear Central Park repeatedly mentioned in the project for this, Chevron property. So I would really like, and to piggyback off of that member's comment, that you please consider naming Central Park Chevron property to something else. Maybe, I don't know, Sunset Development has been a great presence in our, city. How about, memorializing their presence and their contribution to our city by naming this city as Sunset Park instead of another Central Park? Really is, very confusing. Secondly, I was a little bit surprised at the facade that was just shown by the developer. They looked so New York City. I don't know, it doesn't look right with the pretty green hill, in the back. I would like the developer to please consider staying within their modern Italian theme, which I'm seeing in the lot. It's really, I have been to Venezia before, Venice in Italy, that really reminds me of the piazza, in Venice. It's almost like a church building on the outside, rectangular-ish, and on the inside, it is where people live and, congregate. So I would really like to have a uniformity or a continuity of that theme over on this side. That's just my aesthetic suggestion. Otherwise, this is their private property. I really have no business telling them what to do. But just as someone who is into art and appreciate beauty, that's just a suggestion. So anyways, I think, oh, by the way, if it's possible for the developer to consider putting in 2 to 3 escalators at the end of their property on the Chevron property, and then go up, that connects to an overpass, kind of like at the airports. We often have a crosswalk that's in the, up in the sky, and then down to the lot, and then escalator back and forth. I think it would really help us to avoid this terrible, terrible Bollinger Canyon bottleneck. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. I do know that we talked about the park name last time, and it's a placeholder, and I'm pretty sure we won't have 2 central parks in San Ramon, but it was a good call out. Okay. Our next
Don
speaker.
Hofer. And next is Bill Clarkson.
Thank you.
Good evening, council. My name is Don Hofer. I live in Inverness Park behind this property to the south. And I spoke at the workshop. And so I just wanted to, again, speak tonight. I know there's been quite a few changes that have been made to the plan. They look great, I think. Generally, the adjustments to, I had made a few comments about the Central Park and a few other things, which I think are really fantastic, very much in favor of housing near jobs and near transportation, which this is the perfect site for that. And so just wanted to speak in favor and support the plan tonight. Thank you.
Bill Clarkson.
Good evening. First off, I would like to welcome Usher, new commissioner. I know you'll do a great job. We look forward to many years of great service from you. So congratulations. Start off by thanking the planning staff, the planning commission, and the developer for having this concept review process where we're having a series of meetings so the public can get involved and talk about it before it's baked and brought to the or not baked in advance and brought to us for approval without us getting a chance to talk about it. So kudos to all of you. You guys have set up a great model, hopefully for future projects, and that other developers will allow the public to participate. A couple of comments. One is I want to thank the Sunset Development in particular for putting together a buffer area, a green belt behind the homes on Ascot Drive. They currently enjoy that. And it's very nice that they would continue that tradition. We met with Mr. Marin at our local elementary school. And he met with us one evening, and there were about 50 of us who showed up, and it was a great conversation in the round. He sat there and answered every question for about an hour and a half until we ran out of questions. He was, not that he said he would do everything we wanted, but he listened carefully, and his attitude was, and things that there was some control over. Many times the residents could decide which way we want to go in terms of a gate access, things like that. So that speaks kudos to, I think, a relationship that the city and Sunset have developed over a series of years, and it's paying rich dividends for the residents of San Ramon. The last thing I want to talk about is, I think, the need for us to think about, with this 2,600 units we're going to be building, the most underserved, hugely underserved part of our housing stock, and I know that from what I do during my day job, is single-story homes. And I know it's not practical that we do hundreds of them. It's not going to work here. But we have a lot of residents. In fact, I spoke to one this evening in this room who is aging out of their house. They're looking for a place to go and settle and stay in San Ramon. They've been very involved, and they're having a very difficult time finding a single-story home that they can move into. I think we have an obligation We have an obligation to the residents who've been here for 30 or 40 years and paying taxes. And as they age out of their two-story homes and they want to stay in San Ramon, are we building anything for them to live in? An age-restricted area, maybe 65 years or older. Sunny Glen's 55 years or older, but that was built nearly 60 years ago. And today's 65 is, yesterday's 55. But create a age restricted area. I've seen single-story homes that can be narrow, shotgun style. You can have tandem garages, so it isn't a series of all garage faces. You don't want to penalize the developer and not let them get as many units as possible, but I think there's some architectural ways to create single-story homes there that allow them to have their units and to have it look architecturally appropriate. But more importantly is, are we fulfilling our obligation to our aging residents who want to remain in San Ramon and there is no housing stock for them? We can't find them. So thank you for your consideration. Have a good evening. And again, it's great to have you on board.
Thank you, Bill.
No other speaker cards, but I do have a hand raised on Zoom.
Okay,
Jim Blickenstaff.
Good evening, Commissioners. Jim Blickenstaff. Just wanted to make a couple broader comments on the details of this, which are somewhat unsettled now for obvious reasons. The word that comes to mind for me is vision, where you have a city vision for what you are looking for and what you want as a city, reflecting your past. San Ramon has been an alternative to the standard cityscape, which ends up being high-rise and dense and claustrophobic and often has a lot of traffic problems. And we've been a pleasant green alternative to that. I want to keep that theme as a vision for our next 30 and 40 years. So that's going to require us to look critically at things that impede that vision, because we can accommodate development and we can accommodate the market to a certain extent that it can benefit the city, but we have to be mindful and really, I guess, be proactive all the time about a vision for San Ramon that reflects why people came here. For example, a business park. It's not a business center, it's a business park. And the park of that is very critical because the landscaping and the room for landscaping makes something more pleasant, more quiet, more attractive. And we don't want to lose that as we get into higher density, which means higher buildings, closer to the street. And the consequences of that can have a visual and aesthetic impact on the people of the city and the look of the city that's not necessarily attractive or really what you want to have for San Ramon. I like to think of us as above the standard routine of other cities that have just kind of gone over to too much, too dense, too claustrophobic. And so let's keep that in mind as we look at the broader long-term picture here for the city that allows us to keep that vision for San Ramon and not lose it in the momentary, if you want to call it that, accommodation of the market. I sense from Sunset and Alexander that they have a sense of this long-term need of the city as well. And I kind of have seen some movement on their part to accommodate that. And that's very reassuring. And that we can improve on that. And one of the improvements would be the transitional phase from a high core center, limited, don't keep expanding the maximum height to where the core center becomes the dominant feature of San Ramon, but transition that to accommodate as low as one story as you get away from that core center, and then limit the amount of space for the core center. So like I said, it doesn't take over the cityscape to the extent that you have start to have big city problems. So also don't limit yourself in terms of accommodating your long-term view and vision for the city with certain kinds of zonings and general plan numbers that could actually, to one of a better phrase, tie your hands later when you want to accommodate something that would be more appealing. a work in progress, changes over time. And if you keep the theme and the vision of a business park and an alternative to the ordinary cities that seem to almost push people away at times, I think you will keep this going in the right direction. And Chevron, just one quick thought on Chevron. It's a whole open thing on Chevron. It's just like, wow, where do you even start? But one of the things that's important to start at is what I consider an iconic building, that brick building with the tower, that is part of the landscape of San Ramon. People mention it. And it's going
to wrap up now, please. Can I go ahead and ask you to wrap?
Yeah, wrap it up. So I just want to mention that quickly. Let's find a way as we get into details of Chevron to preserve that brick building, or the tower building, I call it, and make it work in the context of the cityscape. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Do we have any other speakers?
No other hands raised, no other speaker cards.
Okay, and no written comment. Is that right?
No.
Okay, why don't we go ahead and close public comment? Before we get started, if I could ask you to repeat, there were 4 questions you would like us to make sure we hit tonight. If we could just chat about those so we make sure we meet what you were hoping to accomplish tonight.
Thanks. So if we could view density, residential density in Bishop Ranch as a site-wide calculation, or DMU South, DMU North is just when the sites get smaller, and if we were to go to, if the sites are bigger, like I said, we think we're going to be at 50 site-wide. So 20 to 60, we're at the top range of that. It's that if you have a certain site that has to be 25 versus 20, that's not going to be a townhome. It changes the building type on that site. So if we can view it as a site-wide allocation, that would be helpful. The second one was the issue of the units on the retail centers, and moving them, the no net loss, moving the units so that we can protect the retail centers.
Wait, could you back up a second? I hate to interrupt you, but could you make it clear exactly what you want in terms of a response from us on that one?
Well, I thought that's something we talked about that was important to you all that had sort of dropped off. And to me, it's important for the retail centers to get better. I think it's more important to you. And I don't know if there was a reason we're not, I don't know if that got enacted or it didn't. It's more of a clarification.
Well, okay, let me see if we're on the same page. What we had talked about at each of the workshops was by converting the orchards to housing as well as retail, we were creating the potential for 2,600 dwelling units that don't exist right now, that aren't part of our general plan, that's not part of our housing element. And at the workshops in the past, various commissioners, including myself, had said that if we're going to do that, we should take the opportunity to take the danger of housing off of our retail areas and our commercial areas to the extent possible, but it has to be done at the same time as rezoning the orchards because of state law. That's what we're trying to get at. And then, as I understand what you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, you are not opposed to that. You believe that's something we should strive for?
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Okay. All right.
Sorry, I wasn't as articulate as you.
No, that's perfectly okay. I mean, I think that we probably would have said that while we're having our discussion up here, just to reiterate for the 4th time. So I appreciate your comments on that. You're on the same page that most of us are. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, those centers are going to be critical for all the people coming in, and the incremental people hopefully are going to make them a lot better. So,
okay.
There was just a comment about unit sizing, that the caps, we think, variety is the key to delivering this stuff quickly. So varieties of densities, variety of unit sizes, and we're more focused on the average not being too big, which if you have the right densities, you'll never get something that's out of whack. But just like we have a 700 square foot studio, which would be kind of small, you might have a bigger 3-bedroom or 4-bedroom, which is above the average. So by capping it, you sort of eliminate that product type, and we'd be in favor of not doing that if possible. And then the last one was just discussion of this orchards plan, which is
Right.
not earth shattering. It's basically what you asked for. So
No, that's fine. I did have a question, going back to question one. Sorry, I let you go on before getting to that point. The idea of a site-wide density, I think the number you gave was 50 dwelling units per acre. As I understood, the concept was that there were some areas I'm going to use Bishop Ranch as sort of a royal term, that you're going to have high density, like the related apartments. They're at least 60 to 70 dwelling units per acre. And obviously in some of the higher rises in the orchards, you're going to be talking about 30, 40, probably dwelling units per acre on the 5 and 7 story buildings. But when you talk about a site-wide density, what area in Bishop Ranch are you talking about? I assume it's not just the orchards.
right. So the orchards is at 55.
Right.
The way we have it. So I'm talking about all the different, if we look at housing overall, all the different housing opportunity sites, City Walk, Orchards, City Village, the other housing opportunity sites, if that would accrue to a density of 50 across the board with a 20 to 60 range, maintain the 20 to 60 range, and go to this site-wide calculation that it should be 50 overall.
Okay, so just so I'm getting the geography in question, basically you're looking at Bishop Ranch, as you use the term, in terms of the site-wide density is going from the orchards all the way up to roughly North Canyon?
One step north of that.
One
so
step.
the border with the condos and the PG&E site.
Okay.
Can I?
Yeah.
Follow? So practically, you've already talked about the unit count for the orchard at 2,600-ish, and City Walk is still anticipated to be around 4,500. Is that correct?
Yes.
I have a question maybe for staff, and I see Ms. Yu in the audience. We have housing opportunity sites inside of Bishop Ranch. And is there any concern from staff if we were to adopt a site-wide density of 50 vis-a-vis our adopted housing element?
No.
Okay.
Because essentially the 50 unit average would be within the range that's designated within the zoning that we put in place for the housing element.
Okay.
So
Okay, good.
how we implement it within the range is
Okay,
subject to local
so there's
review.
no need to go back to HCD on any of these, this density identification.
The only
Cindy wants
issue-
to stand up and chat. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll let her
Yeah,
expand on
yeah.
it. But
No,
there
I don't
are
want to
some-
undo the work that accidentally. So I just wanted to make sure we're careful.
Yes, I'll let.
Okay, thank you. So maybe just to make sure I put some caveats. DMU North and South have a density range that we've identified in our housing element and then in our land use element that we're moving forward with our general plan update is 20 to 60 is the range. You can set a policy in the land use element that, for perhaps this particular area or for the core of the city or the downtown mixed use, however you phrase that policy, that the goal is to achieve that 50 dwelling units per acre. But just to keep in mind that under state law, the range that's been set, and if a developer chose to propose a project anywhere within that range or to increase that range with a density bonus, they're still allowed to do that. So just want to preface that you can set an average as a policy, but it doesn't preclude a developer to develop at the lower end of that range or exceed that range under state law.
Great, thank you. So there were the 4 questions. We captured those to make sure we captured some feedback on that, plus anything else. Is that fair? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Does anybody questions or want to make comments at this point?
I'll lead us off. Okay, so first of all, I thank you so much for your presentation. I appreciate it, and we'll go back through the slides because I think there's a lot of information there that I need to digest, but I like what you see. And I just want to kind of, add some commentary at this point. And I think unlike what we heard perhaps in public comment, I had the opportunity to be in Charlotte, North Carolina, and was really quite impressed with their downtown area. And I would just like to offer some thoughts as we go forward. And I would admit to saying that I have Rick Mark's voice in my head saying, but you need a plan. You need to know what you're trying to aim for before you just start putting in buildings. So I'm channeling Rick. I hope he doesn't mind. So I wanted to think about, this idea of what do we have that works really well. And right now, I would say everybody in San Ramon thinks that Central Park works really well. The idea of the walking district works really well. We like that. But the question that really hit me was, what are we still missing? And as I was walking through this area in downtown Charlotte, there is the Levine Avenue of the Arts. And it is on both sides of this little alleyway, which they put in kids' play stuff, are museums and theaters and a history location. And I thought, that's kind of what we're missing. We're missing the one place where we can put those and kind of concentrate them and create a place where people go. Because if you're going to go to a theater, you're probably also going to go to dinner. Afterwards, you're also going then to have drinks. And if you're close to home, you'll walk home safe and sound. Okay, so that was it. They also have this really interesting historical pathway as you walk the blocks. And we don't really have that here in San Ramon, but we could. And I think that the Bishop Ranch area, I like the idea that you're calling it the Orchards. I would have called it Heritage perhaps, but that's just me. But we have this opportunity that we could start highlighting our historical features. And I think that that is missing. And then the final thing is, I actually was quite impressed with their taller buildings. And I say this because what really struck me was their sidewalks are extremely wide. Yes, I'm saying it again. The 10 to 12 foot wide sidewalk is what encourages people to walk. But they also had amongst these very tall buildings, a very broad plazas that created a very human scale to a tall building. So people didn't feel like it was just a glass steel canyon that didn't encourage them to stay. But I think, so coming away, I'd actually almost encourage us to think about these buildings being a bit taller if we could then open up the plaza. So I'm really pleased with tonight where the park has more of the retail, because I think that's kind of in line with how I'm visioning this. And so I just want to think and challenge folks that we do have this opportunity to not think about, the year or two that it's going to take these to get built. But what do we want this to look like in 2050 and 2060 and 2070? I don't think I'll be here, but and so is it like, do we want to just look like Kansas, or do we want to be the Emerald City? And I think the downtown is the place that you can have the nice quiet suburbs. People like that. I like it. But we could also still have something happening downtown. And I think that this is a really great start. And I would like to encourage, I'm going out on a limb here, Alex. I would like you to think about the Marin Avenue of the Arts. And I think as you look at your plan, that nice little green belt heading towards the park is a great place. And cars aren't in Charlotte, the cars are not allowed on it. It's strictly for family. It's bound on both sides by cute little restaurants. And then the residence buildings are, more like 7-8 stories. So I took pictures for those inquiring minds. So I would just like to challenge it. And I would say that in your slides, this is the one slide that's similar to what I'm talking about, where it's a very nice wide, there's lots of street level stuff, eateries, those kinds of stuff. but people, you know, it wasn't just workers. There was lots of families, people like me walking around. But so I just would like to encourage us to really challenge our thinking. And I do think that it's possible. And I really like this iteration. And I think it's in my head, it's going in the right direction. And I do really want to say that the way this is going and the added retail, I think seems like it's added, will take burden off of our external retail centers, the pressure on those to convert those. So I am in favor of us really using this opportunity again in the core and just being much more affirming of that and being able to then look at our zoning and take the pressures off some of those housing opportunity sites that are more peripheral to the needs of what will be coming if we put in 10,000 more people in the downtown. So thank you.
Just one clarification. When we talk about removing housing from elsewhere, we're not addressing taking them off of housing opportunity sites. We are only taking them off areas that are zoned housing, but housing opportunity sites are housing opportunity sites, and those aren't going to change through anything we're doing right now. So I'm getting confirmation, some nods from.
That's correct.
Yeah, just so we're clear, when we're talking about taking quote housing off, close quote, we're not rezoning stuff that's been zoned as R12. What we're talking about is taking the mixed use designation off of commercial areas because mixed use allows residential to be built on them and the commercial torn down.
So noted.
Yeah, thank you. Just want to make sure we know that the housing opportunity site is part of our plan and that won't be taken off. Yeah. Okay. You have any comments? Yes.
I do. Thank you. So thank you again for giving us the opportunity to have a collaborative type of discussion. I suppose that I'll start with, and I don't know, I don't remember how long ago this was, but the San Francisco Business Times years ago had an article that talked about how our housing crisis was created one story at a time. And it was a study about different projects, a lot of them along the peninsula, all along freeway corridors where developers had built a 3-story building. They had originally proposed a 7-story building, and then they self-selected and dropped their density down to 3 stories. It dramatically reduces the number of units that we have. And when we multiply that by city after city after city, that's why we're down hundreds of thousands of units in this state. And I think there's a variety of reasons why developers are shrinking the size of the buildings. Part of it's some of the financial considerations that you talked about earlier. Some of it is about the product delivery. But I do think that some of it is about trying to appease communities that don't want development, trying to appease planning commissioners who are anti-development. And what we are seeing now is the result of that. We've got housing legislation that's taking away our discretion. We've got RHNA allocations that nobody likes. And it's creating a lot of problems with our abilities to control what's happening in our city. So the plan that you've presented tonight, I'm perceiving that as being significantly less dense than what we saw earlier. And it disappoints me, particularly, I mean, it looks to me like we're using something like half the site along the freeway frontage for single family homes. Which isn't going to get us the Emerald City. It's not going to get us the Emerald City. It just strikes me as wasteful. I think that we talked about that area previously as being a good location for some of the 6- and 7-story buildings. I fully appreciate that we want to have a buffer next to Inverness and that we want to see the project step down. I do think that's important. I don't know whether you can do single-story homes there. I suspect that won't pencil, but I do think that there needs to be a stepping down, but I really think it's important that we get to some height on this site. And lower density needs to be the exception, not the rule. And to the point you raised about the timing for product delivery, I would rather see 300 units developed in 4 years than see another 44 unit condo project or townhome project delivered in 1 year, because we don't get an opportunity to develop the site again. And if we can put 300 families on the same land area where we might put 44 families, I think we are duty bound to do that. And I think the other reason why we really should have a higher density product here, not over the entire site, but I think we want higher density product here, is because we want to have a really great thriving retail environment. And my fear is that if we don't have enough people to populate this area, this interesting retail product that you're talking about isn't going to survive. And we don't want dead ground floor retail. So that's my 2 cents on that point. Like Commissioner Kuznick, I did some traveling recently. I looked at some of the areas outside of Seattle. They've got a town called Issaquah, which is just incredibly dense, and it's really dense single family homes. It was a fascinating product. I had not seen that before. Portland has a lot of 6 and 7 story buildings north of what they're now calling the old downtown area. Lots of people on the street, lots of great retail, interesting area. Not to duplicate that because it was kind of boring because all the buildings look the same, but just in terms of the volume and the density and the land mass of the buildings with the wide sidewalks and all that, just created this really exciting environment. So I want to just say, and then I'm going to answer your questions. I think that this project really presents a special opportunity, just like, I think the entire city center area creates this really special opportunity. And I'd like to see us make sure that we're going to use it to the fullest. And I think we also have to be mindful that there's consequences if we don't. If we build out most of this land area with single family homes and townhouses, there's a consequence to that. And the consequence is we're going to lose another retail center. Poof, there it goes, because we failed to meet those numbers. So that's my 2 cents on the site plan. You asked about addressing density on a site-wide basis. I don't have an objection to that in particular. But I do have a concern that approach, with the kinds of projects that we've been seeing lately, I'm afraid that approach ultimately winds up reducing the densities for the entire site instead of facilitating a higher density project. We continue to see developers come to this planning commission with the lowest possible density townhome project that they can come up with. And then they say, oh, I can't build on half the acreage, so I should be even able to build less. And again, it's a lost opportunity. And if it's an SB 330 project, we can stand up here and say, we want more housing, we want more density, and we can't do anything about it. So that's the thing that I'm wary about. The concept of trying to relocate different units. I think we did talk about that on at the workshop on the 31st. And I came up with a clever idea of trying to send a letter to HCD that we've had changed circumstances. And I was resoundingly shot down. Not possible. I wanted to briefly just comment on Ms. Yee's concept about having policies and goals. So if we've established a range of densities between 20 and 60, the goal is to have people build toward the 60, but we can't make them because the goal is not objective. So that's another concern that I have about the ranges and the broader areas. If we don't specify that we have to have density in these areas, we're not going to get it. And then you talked about the caps on unit size and would like a little bit of feedback on that. I don't feel strongly about this one way or the other. To my mind, you should build what the market wants and what the market's going to want in 10 years and 15 years. If that's stacked flats to fill the need for the single story homes, then maybe that's what it is. I do agree that we need to have some larger unit size so that we have places for families to live in this area. Not just a bunch of 1-bedrooms and studio apartments. So those are my comments. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I do. I want to start off by asking Commissioner Edwards a question. And that is, on the diagram of the orchards, this was titled Chevron Park in our package here. As I understand it, correct me if I'm wrong, one of your objections, hopefully that's not too strong a word, to the proposed site plan is that you think we have too many 2- and 3-story homes and townhomes. Did I get that right?
You did.
Okay, so it'd be better if you could draw it with a pen or a lightsaber or something like that, but because we don't have that, could you sort of visually tell us how you would restructure the 2- and 3-story townhome area? Would you just reduce it in size or would you eliminate it altogether?
So number one, I don't draw in public.
It's okay, you're among friends.
I don't draw in public. I think that when we had our original workshop on January 31st, we had a higher density site plan presented that I think had less than half the size of this in yellow. Wasn't able to find it. I looked earlier. I was not able to find it, but I have. Oh, well, there we go. It looked like that.
Okay,
Where you had 6 to 7-story multifamily homes all along the freeway area. And I think that the feedback we provided at that meeting was that everybody was kind of leaning toward the higher density, but we didn't like the higher density in that corner right next to
Inverness Park, yeah.
So this amount of townhomes,
Okay.
I think is still too much. But this is way too much for my flavor. So ultimately it'll be what it will be, but that's what I'm talking about. And thank you, Chair Alpert.
So just to add to this, the high density, which was the option 3 at the first meeting, had, I think it was 2,850 units approximately. And then at commission direction, we asked to have the 6-story step back a little further from Inverness Park, which is why we got the 4 and 5 along the freeway in the yellow, and that turned into, I believe it was 2,504, at that iteration. And tonight's rendition, I don't think changed that number. In fact, it went up a little bit to 2,600. So while we don't have the 6-story against the freeway, we didn't really eliminate units compared to the, option 4 from last time, that we discussed. So it went from, just to kind of recap, went from 2,850 was the highest density option 3, to 2,500 04 and back up to 2,600, just to put it in context of the number of units, you know. So with that, I'll give it back to you.
Did I see that? There. I was trying to convince and looking over your shoulder while you were talking to Commissioner Edwards. It looks like from the highest density, what we've actually done is we have moved some of the 4 and 5 stories to the south. Actually taking over some of the area that you had originally programmed for the 2 and 3 story townhomes, and you've moved the 2 or 3 story townhomes down to the freeway area, probably around the Oaks. I'm guessing that's where the Oaks is. And I'm also guessing that part of the reason for doing that is if you want to keep the Oaks, you can't put a 7-story apartment building cheek to dowel with that. Okay, so it's a which poison you want to take. Okay. All right, I understand. I mean, looking at the original high density and comparing it to what you propose now, I mean, I personally think the newer one makes more sense, particularly with the retail around the entirety of, I guess we can't call it Central Park anymore. We'll have to come up Sunset Park for a placeholder. Okay. So I think that, and they put a large residential building next to it. Thank you. I didn't pay close attention to your cover photograph. When I came in, I didn't have a lot of time to do that, but after staring at it for a while, it occurred to me that someone needs to post this on the website, and I'll tell you why. When I looked at this long enough, I realized what you have is people focus on the orchard / Chevron Park in the lower right-hand corner of the picture. But what is really seems to me important to me is the area to the north of Bollinger and also to the east, because what you've put in here is City Walk. You've also put in City Village in there. And for trying to get an idea of what the orchards would look like in context, that's very important, because if you take an overhead view right now, what you see in that area north of Bollinger is parking lots and a couple of lakes. They're nice, but parking lots. But you get a visual of what the area would look just if you put in City Walk. And I think that's important because people have focused on the idea of trying to create a project that is consistent with the rest of San Ramon. But San Ramon was built as a bedroom community. It was spread all the way out into Doherty Valley where I live to build single family homes. I don't have a 1/4 acre home. I'd love to, but they didn't make them when I bought. But they're all large single family homes. And as you know, from what's being built in City Village and also at the marketplace, they're the same thing. They're 25 square foot, 4-bedroom, 3-bath, single family homes. And the problem with that type of product as being built right now has been noted is that they exercise a loophole on our inclusionary housing ordinance where they don't create any type of real affordable housing. And the only way you're going to do that is to have detached home and multifamily. And when we talk about building affordable housing, the only way we're going to do that is go above 3 stories, really. I mean, I suppose you could do it at 3-story stacked flats, maybe, but practically speaking, the affordable housing is when you get down to the 1,000 square foot level. I noticed that the chart that you put up there about the proposed bedroom sizes in the I don't know if it's the related companies 381 units or not, but basically the bulk was right in the middle, 1 and 2 bedroom units. And those to me are aimed at either single families, couples, or starting out families, which in the 13 years I've been on the Planning Commission has been the major complaint of people who come in and talk about housing is, I can't get my kid who just graduated from college or started a job to live in San Ramon because there's no place they can afford. And the only way you're going to get that is to have the affordable housing. And I think that to have this blown up in size would give people a better view of what this area will look like. And by putting that type of product you're talking about in the orchards as well as in City Walk, you have a situation where you do have the ability to have affordable housing and you take off pressure on rezoning our tract homes from 4 units per acre to 12 or 14 to accommodate the state. The other reason I would ask you to blow this up, and this goes to the city as well, is that what isn't shown on here are the housing opportunity sites that have been planned for Bishop Ranch. And there's a number of them here that are now occupied by either parking lots or in office buildings. And the reason I've sort of badgered Mr. Mayron for the last 3 workshops about what he's thinking about Bishop Ranch north of BR 2600 is why not build high density housing in that area? And if you look at this diagram here, you'll see that the high density is in the core of the city. That's supportive of what we hope will be retail, not only at the orchards at City Center, but also at BR 2600 in the City Walk area. And then you don't need 6-story apartment buildings north of Norris Canyon. You can have a City Walk type development there that's still dense. It's 20 dwelling units per acre. I would hope that in that case, that some of the product we would see in that area, even if it's for sale, would be more like the type we have at 2481 Deerwood, which we're going to see next week, which is about 50 units and about 2.9 acres, which have actually for sale affordable units in them. And I think that's the key, is to be able to have a realistic affordable units being built in the city. You know, the state wants us to build all this houses and all this affordable housing, but as of yet, I don't think they figured out how to repeal the law of economics. And people are going to build what is feasible to build economically, not just what people want. So when you post this, you don't know what the housing opportunity sites are going to look like. So that's okay. But it would be helpful if you could just, as a placeholder on the area that you have for the orchards, put some type of picture of building so people can see the mass. That's the thing. People don't have a real feel for what something looks like until you put it in context. And if you could put on this photo in the lower right-hand corner, something that is similar to what you have at City Walk, those types of buildings, people they can see, oh, that's what it's going to look like. That's how it fits in with the rest of San Ramon. And I think part of the problem is people don't have a gut visualization of what this looks like. They just see the number 2,600 dwelling units and they go bonkers because they think traffic, what's this going to do to the school? Any number of one of those things. And how ugly it's going to look. I mean, we heard the 85-foot height limit thrown about a few times too. So I think if you show what you're talking about visually in the context of the entire development in Bishop Ranch, that would make it a lot easier for people to understand what you're trying to do and visualize, you know, the benefits to the city in doing so. It would also make it easier, I think, for people to understand 20 dwelling units per acre north of City Walk might be okay, depending on the type of product, because it sort of blends in towards the rest of the city. As you have the buffer for Inverness Park, where you flow into that residential development. So it's a matter of how this fits into the city. I think that's important. I think the visualization is important. In terms of the unit size, I think a cap is kind of artificial. I think what you program for related companies is about right, you know, but again, as I think has been said, I think the market sort of dictates to a certain extent what gets built. We have control over density, but in terms of the size of the units, you can't build something that people won't buy. And the fact of the matter is, if you can build a 700 square foot unit, somebody's going to live in there because it's going to be priced enough so someone can, particularly if it's a rental. I think I've covered most of the questions you want, not exactly in the same order you posed them, and maybe not as framed it as you did, but you know, I empathize with what Commissioner Edwards said about having some more density in the core area, and particularly the iteration you've done, you actually have 2 or 3 story townhomes along the freeway. And that was one of the concerns we've all had. So maybe there's a way to move stuff around down there. I don't know if that works for you economically. Probably it does. But the rest of it, I'm happy with what you've site planned for it and the size of the buildings. I think it's going to lead to a good product mix for the city. It's going to be profitable for you. You're going to have people that are going to walk across Bollinger and work at City Center, live and play at City Center, and hopefully the City Walk area. But, the fact of the matter is we can't turn Chevron Park into a park. It's going to have to be housing. The state doesn't give us a lot of opportunities. And this really has given us an opportunity to salvage some of what's left of our retail area. I mean, I've said this since I've been on the commission. When the county planned Doherty Valley, they did not do the city any favors. They had 0 commercial really planned for out there. And if you see right now, the only commercial they have out there is the Walgreens. I think it's a Walgreens that we went through about 4 planning sessions to get approved. And we have that whole area out there with no contribution to the city general fund other than property tax revenue. That's not a good thing for any city. And there's lots of cities that are having the same problem. So we should learn from those mistakes and preserve what we can. And in sensible planning, create a situation where we can actually get some type of retail commercial tax base in the city. And it seems to me that what you're hoping to do here, I think, sort of falls into that category. And I do appreciate you coming back to us on these occasions and talking to us about it. As has been mentioned here, and I know you've probably heard before, one of the hardest things the Planning Commission ever has to do is have a concept review, and basically you've got a plan that's basically finished down to the type of doorknobs that are used on the doors. And it's, in our view, it's much better for everyone concerned to have these conversations with the public. And at the public workshops you've had, I mean, the city citizens' response to this project, I think, has been very positive. And I think that shows the effort that you put into talking to people about it. They recognize the benefits to the city. So hopefully we've given you a few ideas or at least suggestions that you can work with, and maybe come back to us with what you think. If you don't think these things work, just tell us that and tell us why. I mean, this is an open dialogue. We don't have all the answers, but we're really, really good at listening. So if we're wrong, please tell us. And but keep at it. I look forward to having you come back the next time. Thanks.
Commissioner Ahmed, I wanted to give you an opportunity to ask questions if you have any or not,
I'm afraid to sound stupid, but
No.
I'm new here, but I do want to re-emphasize a few points I've heard. And I sort of feel like they're important to me also. One is what Mr. Clarkson said about single-story homes for senior citizens, especially when they need as they age out of these double-story homes. When my parents were looking for homes a few years ago before they passed away, it was very difficult to find single-story homes around this neighborhood. And also as to affordable homes, I was talking to the police chief a few days ago, and he said only 15% of the police force lives in San Ramon because they can't find homes. They're so expensive. So I think these are very important factors you should take into consideration as we build the city. That's what I want to add.
Great. Thank you. Not a stupid question at all. Overall density, the calculation of 50. I guess I'm a little more focused on the proposed number of units. And what I heard tonight was no proposal to change the 4,500 at City Walk and the 2,600 at Chevron Park. And that's what I think about more. But I also was, as it relates to the site layout, first of all, I do like the site layout. I like the way you shaped the park and that you surrounded it with retail. I think that'll be nice. I think it was a good change from the 2 and 3 story to the 4 and 5 around there. I think that was a very good move. The one area that we could consider for slightly more units is the 4 and 5 story right next to the freeway. I could see that stepping back up to 6 to 7. And that might be a way to enable additional units as well as changing the just the side of the street that's next to Inverness Park to the 1-story product, but across the street could be the 2 and 3 if it architecturally can work. And that way there's really no net loss of units, maybe an increase. I think that'd be something worth exploring. The cap on unit size, it helped to see the range of unit size that we have at City Village and at the apartments. And what's clear to me is, capping units doesn't make sense at all. But what I liked seeing there was the range of unit size. And I like that there's quite a few more. And I think I heard from tonight, the 2 and 3 bedroom up into 4 bedroom, as opposed to the majority of studios or 1 bedrooms. I think that's a middle size that we don't have enough of. So I wouldn't be in favor of capping unit size and letting you kind of see what the market will bear with that, knowing we still have to get the 2,600 plus units in there, So not a favor of that. I think the rezoning aspect of being able to change DMU south from, office space to residential, I think we're all saying the same thing. It's probably a question really more for staff on the process we're going to go through to review all of those mixed use sites and when we're going to be able to do that. But I don't think there's any objection among the 5 of us that that's what we would like to do, in exchange for this. And I think it's really just looking to, it's probably just a scheduling thing, when we can actually take a look at those other sites, not housing opportunity sites, but other mixed use sites. And I think we had a little discussion of that last time around some of the shopping centers. So I think we're evolving all in the same place. I did have a couple of questions, just really more about a process. You've come 3 times, 3.5 or 4 times if you count the committee work. Each time I think we're getting closer and refining. At some point, you're going to probably want to go away and work and not, keep doing concept reviews. So if not tonight, if the next time, if we can be starting to zero in on where the questions that you have for us, would be helpful, because I think we would like you to move forward as opposed to, we're making incremental progress. I don't want to slow it down, but I also want to make sure that if there are specific things that you'd like to do to move faster, that we can be prepared for that. Some of the drawings you had of different architectural styles, sometimes we'll have concept reviews where you'll poll the commissioners to see what styles we like and things like that. You haven't gotten that far to ask us yet, but I think at some point that would be a good thing to do. This is probably more of a question for the staff on, or maybe it's you, on your plan for the park to come to life. Is that a city park? Is that a private park? Is it a private park open to the public, and how you want to design it? If it's going to go through the city planning process in the Parks Department, or is it going to be some, similar to what we're doing at BR6? That would be probably helpful for us to all know. Like my fellow commissioners, thank you again for taking the time to, spend with us. I hope that they were getting some additional input, as we go forward. Commissioner Wallace, you
I had a question, but it's not addressed to the applicants for staff. It's a process question, and it has to do with the EIR. I don't know if that's out of bounds for tonight, though I thought I'd ask first.
What's the question about the EIR?
Okay, I just want to know if the subject is open for a question before I got.
Depends on the question.
Oh, gee, where have I heard that before? Okay, so here's the question. We are, at least staff is deep into preparing updates to the general plan to implement what we did for the housing element. And unless there's something radically different, I'm assuming that process includes preparing an EIR.
You're correct.
All right, so right now, what is the EIR plan for the Orchard / Chevron Park? Is that being done on the basis of current zoning, which is office administrative, or is it sort of programmed for some type of mixed use development?
Well, there's really two aspects to this. So as you're aware, part of this process and part of the early discussions we had was about trying to integrate this into the update that we're doing as an option. We did not want to delay the work going forward on the land use and general plan updates in response to the housing element. And so one of the strategies we're taking with regard to the environmental impact report is we're looking at the changes to Chevron Park as one of the alternative concepts that is being analyzed. So we can look at it from the standpoint of no change to Chevron Park or a preferred alternative that includes the change. So that gives the flexibility of deciding which path we want to take. Again, there's analysis done in both concepts, no change as well as with the change. But in order to complete that work, we need a overall profile for Chevron Park to do the analysis on that. And it is enough to have the density range locked in. We don't need a detailed design, but we do need some basic information in order to do the impact analysis.
Okay, so here's the tougher question. Let's assume that you've done that work. It's been clear throughout these meetings that at least several of us on the dais here believe that if we go ahead and implement the change to the current Chevron Park property to make it mixed use from office administrative, we should also change designations in other areas of the city that have a mixed use designation on them and change them to some type of commercial status to preserve the retail and commercial that exists on them. And because we're doing that at the same time as a rezone of Chevron, we're meeting the contemporaneous no net loss rule. And so my question to you is, are we doing anything or do we need to do anything vis-a-vis the EIR that would relate to a rezoning of certain areas in the city that are now mixed use that we want to label as retail or commercial?
Yes, we're employing the same strategy as looking at it as an alternative option.
Okay.
That we can layer in or not layer in.
Okay. Subset of that question. If you're doing that, are you doing the layering on a site specific basis or just assuming, okay, we're going to change a potential 22,000 dwelling units to commercial?
It's all tied into the land use map itself and the
Yes.
changes. So it is site specific.
Okay. All right. Okay. That answers both of my questions. Thank you.
Just to follow up, do you need anything from us to finish the Chevron Park alternative?
Well, ultimately, we need to be good with the density ranges of the DMU South. Being able to have that profile and to be able to incorporate a realistic capacity is what ultimately comes down, and that triggers demographics and everything else that we have to analyze.
So we still have some more work to do then to zero in on that density at this point?
Yeah, and so this also has to do with the density ranges that were discussed on some of the other sites that are within the ranch as well, and how that will then translate into zoning.
Okay.
So just to follow up on the follow-up question, I'm assuming on the latter category, the other sites and the ranch you're talking about, or would be the areas that are DMU North in those areas?
Correct. I mean, we already have City Walk pretty well
Yes.
programmed in, DMU North, and then there's some of the other
Well,
areas.
there's the commercial
Yeah.
emphasis and then there's the residential
Correct.
emphasis areas, which I think are north of what Mr. Mayron was talking about as part of the quote, the ranch, close quote.
Correct, but we still have to do analysis on that. As you recall, we're also unwinding the North Camino Ramon specific plan as part of that effort.
Yeah, well, that's sort of the tail end to figure out what we're going to do with that space first. With respect to the DMU commercial emphasis, the DMU commercial or residential emphasis areas, we already have, I think, density ranges program from there.
Correct.
I wonder if it would be helpful to have workshop, study session, or a conversation at least, as to whether we're still comfortable with those areas, because one of the issues that I still think is open, and Ms. Yee can correct me, is one of the things was percentages of commercial non-residential uses in at least the commercial emphasis and the residential emphasis areas. One of the things that we have talked about here, I'm not sure we got an answer, is if we want to have a mixed use definition that says thou shalt build non-residential uses in this area to meet a quote objective close quote standard, don't we have to have some type of number that says this portion or this amount of a project or area must have this percentage of residential or this percentage of non-residential?
Well, if you recall, we created an FAR ratio for the commercial emphasis that has a minimum FAR
Right.
for non-residential uses. And so that's the way of accomplishing that. And that ratio was tied to basically slightly above what the existing condition is in terms of FAR
Okay.
within the city.
And is it staff's understanding that those FAR ratios were basically passed on by the commission? Approved?
That's my understanding.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure, because I have to go back and look at, what we talked about, because that's always been an area of discussion, let's say, not say necessarily conflict.
And we are working to come back to the commission with growth management as well as the land use element as a whole. And so there'll be additional opportunities to discuss that.
Okay.
In the not too distant future.
Okay, yeah, I mean, there's that issue. There's also a definition of what mixed use is and what non-residential use and all that good stuff.
Yeah, right now we're really focusing on policy direction as well as the land use maps, because that triggers the EIR.
Right.
And so that's a critical path.
No, I understand that. I'm just trying to get a better sense of where you are and
Yes.
what you're going to need from us and make sure that we're all on the same page. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Let me see if any other comments. How about if, do you want to come up and sort of make sure that we're hitting your asks for tonight? And then as you see where you would like to see this go next, and, if you can leave us with questions to think about for next time, or if you have more questions tonight, want to make sure we're making good use of your time.
That's great. I'd love to just clarify some things and ask some questions. Regarding the broad sidewalks and plazas and the human scale, I think Bishop Branch from our beginnings has been known as a park-like setting. We put that in all of our office things. It's a park-like setting. And it'll always be that way. This is not a super urban place with concrete sidewalks and no trees. Everything has huge setbacks. The trees will be big. We take good care of them. And with regards to the arts piece, it's on my mind a lot. And we're trying to figure that out. We're trying to figure out how to have live music. Does that happen indoors? Does it happen outdoors? We were looking at actually a history timeline that's down at a 5 Point project. I think it's on the old air base in Orange County. And they had a really cool thing with the timeline and events on it, and kids love it, and it's educational. So that stuff's on our minds, and I appreciate the encouragement. With regard to the article, one story at a time, I just worry that there's a stigma that's developing about what home builders have done. And, like farmers feed us, these home builders provide us our communities. And I think as densities get required to be higher and higher, and people like these elevator served concrete buildings, it's just, and they do deliver some of that stuff, but what they've delivered, the stuff that has a front door and a driveway and a stoop, I think that's really important. And again, it's 5 times more dense than a quarter-acre lot. I know they're not all exactly a quarter-acre, but I think that's really important for our community. And you couple that with the timing of what's going on here. We have 20 buildings. So if related starts this year, they'll deliver in 2026. It takes a year for them to lease up. If we put another building up that's going to interfere with that year of lease up, they'll just have a gas war with each other and you can't do it. So we've got to wait the 3 years to build it, the 1 year for it to stabilize. It'll always happen in a year. And that's the earliest we could deliver another building. So if we go through that, it's like all 20 buildings, we're talking about 2045 for when the last building gets constructed. We're comfortable with that. It's going to double the amount of apartments in San Ramon, which is great. It's going to put them in a great format. I just worry that that timeline is not going to create the type of downtown changes that San Ramon really wants. It's obviously going to be through multiple housing cycles, which that's not what the state's going to want. And I think the role that these home builders play to be able to move through product and create these communities is a really important thing. And I didn't hear any feedback about it. I don't think the stuff between 20 and 80 is something we want. It just, when you get into that 80 range, you get a really institutional quality building that, you know, when we do the polling, thumbs up, thumbs down on votes, it's going to be all thumbs down on the stuff that's 40 units an acre and things like that. So I firmly believe that those two, I don't want to build 10 units an acre. That would be silly. I think, 20-ish is really a good product for this community, and 80 is a great product. With regard to the affordable piece on the Chevron, on the orchards, that sort of CGI image we have with the renderings, you want us to fill in the orchards project, and yeah. So we just need to take the next step with the land plan. And I think what I heard, I think the only comment, I may be wrong, I apologize if I am, is to increase the unit count a bit by taking the 4 and 5 story on the freeway, raising it to 6 to 7 story and dragging it south a little bit to try and, okay. And that's the change.
I think that was the thinking we had for 2 reasons. One is to provide a buffer for freeway noise for the entire development. And second of all, to increase the density without interfering with the buffer around Inverness Park.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that at least most of us were talking about that. Commissioner Emmers might be different, but I think that's what we're talking about.
I think it's moving slightly in the right direction, but maybe not as far as you would like.
I like the concept of dragging the building south.
Okay.
Okay.
And this,
I think
so
that's
the,
All right, so
there's
winner.
no, Amy, Commissioner Kuznick, you're, okay, good.
Yeah, just realistically, that segment along the freeway, you have these heritage oaks that are going to be a pesky problem. Beautiful, but that's not my problem.
Come up to, but not surround.
Right.
Yeah, we won't. We'll do something that.
But I will say it might be a nice little corner spot for some of these little 1 stories.
On the freeway.
Okay, the one story.
I'm trying.
Without that, I'm risking getting into dangerous territory here, but I think, I mean, I'm like, I would rather go buy 25 homes in San Ramon and rip the second level off and call it a day rather than put this site up into these big lots. I guess my feeling on that is if my wife and I were getting older and we were empty nesters and I didn't want to walk upstairs, or I guess I was anticipating that at some point I didn't want to walk upstairs. And I would probably be at a point where I'd rather live closer to the shopping center in a big condo where I'm not dealing with a roof and a yard and all that stuff. And I can lock the key and go on vacation, take the elevator there. That's kind of how I feel about that. I might be totally wrong, and maybe I'm being insulting to the desires of, but I just feel like, rather than compromising land to do that, and honestly, I would prefer to go out and, modify existing homes to create it, because we want the densities to be correct here. If it's a must, if there's some reason where the view plane from Inverness Park desires 1 story versus 2 story, we're committed to 2 story on that edge. We won't build 3 story that's looking in the yards, but if that's the desire, that's a different story, and we can address it. I just have a tough time with the single story thing. And maybe I'm wrong. You can tell me if I'm wrong about the condo thing, but
Well, if you visualize a condo as one story, I think you're right. I mean, again, if the idea is so you don't have to walk upstairs, you walk on the elevator, go up to your floor, go into your unit, and it's all on one level, you've accomplished the same thing.
That's kind of what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
And I get that not everybody wants to go to Belmont. Yeah, I'm not saying that, but
Yeah.
I'm not saying that, but it just seems like condo living is more walkable. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I may be there shortly.
I would just add, I think part of it is if you've spent your entire adult life living in a single family home, the concept of moving into a condo feels like you're getting moved into a rabbit cage. And it's just a matter of getting used to it, I think. Moving into a 250 square foot rabbit cage is probably a problem. But if you're talking about a 1,500 square foot condo, I mean, then Commissioner Wallace mentioned earlier the concept of a 750 square foot unit. I mean, that's what I lived in Walnut Creek, and that's a nice size 1 bedroom.
I have to confess, I did crib from your last meeting.
But I think I understand that you want to have kids come home and you want to have bedrooms for them. And, you know, I understand these things. I'm trying to balance it because I don't like city center, you know, some of these things have not been built before in the suburban context. So the vision for the condos is it's not going to be a 400 unit building. I think it'd be like a 50 unit building. I think it would have porches and glass and high ceilings and be 1,500 feet, because the very people that I want to buy them are the ones moving out of a 4,000 foot home to free that home up for a new family to move in and create a really nice living style close to the retail. And I just, sometimes I'm not sure, like, it's not going to feel like a rabbit cage, I guess is my point. It's going to be nice.
And I guess I'll tell you, I know that. I know that. But I think that, I don't know, what do I say? Joe Public, who isn't familiar with this kind of product, there's fear. You have them walk a project and it's amazing. And I never thought that a condo could look like this. So lots of big vision,
And
which I like to see.
I'll also say, you know, like I said in the beginning, we're investor, owner, builders. I have no interest in creating a lot of these home builder sites because it reduces the stuff that I can own long term. That's my thing. I would not be advocating for it unless I firmly believed it was right, because of the speed and because of the quality of the neighborhood. So
I guess I wanted to just ask, right now you're anticipating 2-story all along the Inverness Park, that first row of homes next to it, you know, and then it'll step up to the 2 and 3-story and then up to the 4 and 5 at some point. And so I think at least the public comment and what I'm not sure I totally buy into not needing this is that first row just next to Inverness Park as being the single story. And I get what you said about, you know, it's a different type of product, but is it really that different when it's a 2-story across the street versus a 1-story next to it? I get you can have fewer units because they'll probably be wider than a 2-story, you know, but, you know, is that, and I'm not sure how many you could fit in along Inverness Park, if it's 20 or so, and it becomes 18 or 15. But the offset is the 16-story against the freeway. You know, overall, are the economics severely compromised when you do something like that, or is it something else in play?
I mean, this is a big, really expensive project, so it's not, you know, you're splitting hairs with that many homes, but we can do it if you want it, and it's something that's required, or if it's because of the view plane or something like that, we can look at that. My feeling about the buffer and the view plane is that what's going to be more impactful there is the actual design of the space between the two and the landscape. And so you know, if there's going to be money spent on something, I'd rather spend it on that, which I think would be more effective for the Inverness Park owners. But if the single story thing is what everybody wants, certainly I heard Mayor Clarkson talked about it, I'm happy to do it.
Can I make a suggestion? I think the homes in Inverness are basically, most of them are 2 stories.
Yeah.
Would it be possible for you to create a visual of 1-story homes on that first row versus 2-story homes?
Sure.
I mean, again, some of us are visual learners. So if you say, here's what it will look like, I think it's easier to explain to people to understand the concept. So hopefully you can do that without, having to mortgage the ranch.
And I think
Oh, yeah.
it's visual, but I think it's also a product type that's severely lacking is what I heard.
Well, I
Yeah.
mean, I think everyone would agree with that. The question is, what does it look like, and does it really work? So again, I would suggest that if we had a visual of it, and maybe some, I don't know if the economics were that vital, but at least the visualization. So I mean, I'm not, for the record, I'm not that set on having a 1-story home in that row when most of the homes in that area are 2 stories. So, but there's been enough comment on it that I think a visualization would be helpful.
Sure. It seems like the whole cap on unit size thing is the affordable housing issue. When you were talking about affordable housing, were you talking about affordable by design or technically affordable that meets the % AMI
The latter.
ladder?
Yeah, again, creating affordable housing as quote affordable housing, I'm not sure that really works, but generally in our city, what we've done is we want the affordable units to look just like the market rate units. So it'd be more the latter of being able, either the rental price or the purchase price would be dictated by the AMI.
Yeah. So in City Walk, what we did was mix all those into the apartments, and they'd be the same, that'd be the.
Correct. And that's the way that the city policy has been, at least as long as I've been on the commission, so that when you walk past the various units, you can't tell that one's quote affordable, close quote, and another one's market rate.
Yeah. And then one thing we were talking about was, first of all, if we build townhome, if it at 20 units an acre, it's going to be, you can't fee out of, those will all be attached. So it'll be required build in place, or however you say it. We have been thinking about the option of building an all affordable project, which typically comes at a very high density, which is good, and delivers deeper affordability in the units. And it also delivers more long-term affordability because it doesn't ever change. And sometimes I don't know exactly the specifics, but sometimes if you have an affordable townhome and a bunch of regular ones that can go to market at some point. Lauren would know about that, but we think it's a better way of delivering more units at a deeper level of affordability that's perpetual, with an operator that really knows how to provide a lot of other things that are good in the building. So did I get that right? Or I didn't know about the townhomes going to market, but it seems like somehow they can. And the plan for the park, I think we'd probably like to do it like a City Walk park where we build it and operate it, but it's however we did in City Walk. Yeah.
I think the process was the city and Sunset worked together to design the product and
exactly.
then, like that's the City Green Park. I think that's how that's going.
Yeah. Exactly. So we'll rename it Orchards Park for now, just a placeholder. All the park names in City Walk were placeholders. We have one of the names, we have yet to announce it, but that's the plan is that sufficient for okay. Yeah, I think that's it. So appreciate your time. Thank you.
What do you see as where you want to come back next and what you'd like to do next time and sort of the next steps? How do you see that? Yeah.
Well, it kind of depends whether you want to represent what you've heard tonight as a revision to this plan. If we're comfortable with the density ranges and issues like that, we can continue the discussions with the land use element and proceed with this. Ultimately, Sunset will produce some sort of, planning document for the actual details of the project. Right now, we're still at a very high level in terms of units. I mean, they've gone farther than just basic land use, obviously here. But similar to like City Walk, there'll be some much more detailed plans and entitlements that will come along with that. So the question, I guess, comes, do you want to lock in this vision that you're, based on the comments you've heard tonight, and come back one more time? Or do you want to take what you've heard and then come back through a site level approval process?
I just fear that it would be a waste of time to have a whole, or maybe it's just a presentation at one of the regular meetings, would just show that what the change, and then
Yeah, we
you
could do
could
it
say
that way.
yes or no.
I think that makes sense. Yeah.
And we can get the visuals for the 1-story versus 2-story as part of that.
Right. Start that.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Any last minute comments? Again, thank you so much for coming out and spending time with us. Hope it's useful for you. I think the public appreciates it for sure. Yeah. So
It's our pleasure. And
Great.
welcome. Yeah.
thank you, Sunset team. Okay. As this is a special meeting, that is our only item for tonight, with the exception of, just as a reminder, we'll be back here Tuesday night, which is our next planning commission meeting, and 6 o'clock in this room. And there's no final comments. I'll go ahead and adjourn our meeting tonight at 7:57.